Welcome to ICE Webinars, a cool place for hot topics. ICE Magazine is proud to bring you our new monthly webinar series to the imaging industry. ICE is the community that directly links nearly 7,000 imaging professionals with a monthly magazine, online community, annual conference, and now a monthly webinar series. We'd like to invite you to ICE 2021. The Imaging Conference and Expo is the only conference dedicated to imaging directors, radiology administrators, and imaging engineers from hospital imaging departments, freestanding imaging centers, and group practices. ICE offers valuable CE credits from the ASRT and ACI, pending approval. And keeping in line with our successful conferences in the past, offers comprehensive educational opportunities for attendees. Registration is open online at attendice.com. We are excited about today's presentation featuring Janel Byrne, Organizational Effectiveness Manager at Children's Hospital, Los Angeles. Janel partners directly with the Chief People Officer to lead CHLA's Organizational Effectiveness Initiative enterprise-wide. Today's webinar is eligible for one ARRT Category A Continuing Education Credit by AHRA and is approved for one CRA credit. You can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey. More details on this at the end of today's webinar. As I mentioned earlier, our presenter today is Janel Byrne. As a values-based professional, Janel's toolkit includes a thorough understanding of human behavior, business-informed performance, and process improvement, coaching, consultation delivered with integrity and authenticity. In today's presentation, she will provide simple tools to transform difficult conversations, both at work and at home, into effective ones. Janel, you may begin whenever you are ready.
Thank you for that. I'm excited to be here with you all. So this is our Effective Conversations Learning Burst. And it's very intentionally called a burst because we have about 45 to 50 minutes of content and then time for your questions. So we are going to go really high level where my hope is that you're walking out with a burst of energy to bring at least one thing you take from today to life. With that, and just some housekeeping, some logistics so that I can plant the seed with you all. You'll see in your toolbar, we do have one handout already ready to rock and roll for you called the Effective Conversations Worksheet. We will be together working through your approach for a conversation that you need to have in the future. For adults, what's critical for us with any of this type of learning, but in particular, a really fast burst like this, is that you make it real. So you need to be focusing on something that is real to you, a conversation that you need to have. So wanted to draw your attention there real fast as you start getting yourself situated. We'll talk more through it in just a little bit as we get ready for you to really start thinking about your approach. When I think about this presentation, I've done multiple versions of it, and I need to shout out some key references for you all as far as learning more. And critical would be Crucial Conversations, Tools for Talking When Stakes Are High. And then Thanks for the Feedback, The Art and Science of Receiving Feedback Well. And the addition to that title is Even If It's Poorly Delivered, and frankly, you're not in the mood. So I love both of these. When I think about effective conversations, oftentimes folks think just it's about how you deliver information, and it's equally about the how you deliver and also how you receive. For today, the goal of all of this is around managing you in this conversation, not controlling anyone else. Hopefully none of you thought I was going to teach you how to Jedi mind trick, influence, control anybody else. This is really about managing yourself, and a core component about that is also how you receive feedback, how you shift your approach based on what the other person shares with you. So both are worth the additional read. So let's get right into it. Let's get our brains warmed up. Now, I want you to use the chat function, and then I'll be able to read off some of your thoughts. But let's think of a time when you had a difficult conversation with a coworker, friend, family member that did not go well. What went wrong? Why did it go wrong? What happened in this conversation that it did not go well? Just jot down a few words and send it on over in the chat. So seeing some come through here, we've got a mixture of different opinions. The other person got really angry. It wasn't the right time, not the right space, emotions. Yeah, welcome to human beings. So these conversations, it's not there's always the what of it, the actual content that you're saying. A lot of it is the how it's delivered and how folks receive it. And we all have these differing opinions and emotions that can really get in the way. So when I think of this, in particular in healthcare, we well, actually, let me just take a step back and especially recognizing in just 2021, we absolutely face conversations every day. And when I delve that even deeper into our healthcare space, there are real consequences. When we think at the end of the day, patient safety, patient care that are at stake, if we don't navigate these conversations well. And when I think about the toolkit for today for you all, this is about handling any conversation well, because at any point in time, a conversation can become challenging and you weren't even expecting it. So when I put this into context for you all, let's talk first the context of a very difficult conversation. So we're all on the same page. I'm talking about the stakes are high. So big consequences. Again, like I've mentioned in healthcare, there couldn't be higher consequences. Emotions run strong. So as some of you all sent over, opinions differ. These are some critical elements that make a conversation more challenging. So when I think of that, I want to flip us for today into the what should an effective conversation, what are the elements of an effective conversation? And these are the elements that I really want you to be inspired around today, leaving this session feeling like you can bring some of this to life. They're always respectful, even if it's uncomfortable in the moment. And depending upon your relationship with conflict, and we'll get into that in a second, it can be really uncomfortable and unbelievably important to lean into. Honest ideas are exchanged. Notice I didn't say political. Now, each one of us in our organizations, it would be silly of me to say that politics don't exist in every organization and there's dynamics, there's culture that you have to navigate. Absolutely. Absolutely. The core of this is the approach in which you can ultimately share those honest ideas, your honest perspective, so that you can move forward more effectively. So how do you do that? How do you do that plus navigate your reality? Positive intent is present, action results in the dialogue, the quality of the relationship grows. Notice I didn't say you get your way. Some of the best conversations that I've had that I would categorize as, ooh, this one's going to be difficult, is where my mind has been changed and I now have increased trust with this person. So I haven't necessarily gotten what I was hoping for when I originally stepped into the situation. My mind is switched. I'm thinking a different way. And you know what? I know I can go back and have tough conversations with this person because we've got that rapport. We have that respect for one another. Now, this is where we get into the fundamentals. Why do we even have sessions like this? Why do we have to have these communication sessions, these different types of learning and development? A critical piece of this is because we're human beings with defense mechanisms. So when I think our core defense mechanisms, fight, flight, or even freeze, our bodies do not know that we are not back in the caveman days running away from a saber-toothed tiger. Our brain does not recognize that we aren't running away from a stampede. In fact, we're sitting in a challenging conversation with a colleague, with a family member, with a patient. We are physiologically hardwired to feel before we think. That means our heart starts pumping in this situation that our body deems as stressful, as stress inducing, as something that we need to protect ourselves from. Our heart will start pumping so that it can get blood to our limbs, so that we can run away, we can react to save ourselves before our brain turns on. Now, mind you, it's pretty fast. The brain ultimately does turn on, but in those seconds where the heart is pumping, that's when the emotions take over. And as you all mentioned at the first part of why these conversations went wrong, emotions got in the way. So coming back to my statement around this is around you managing you. What I'm talking about is you managing your defense mechanisms so that you can show up in the best way possible to achieve the best outcome possible. And that only works if you're really tapped in to what your defense mechanisms, where you really go in these situations. So I'll give you an example for myself. 99.9% of the time, I am flight or freeze. I am not a fan of conflict. HR, the space of HR was probably a weird path for me to go. I've definitely done the employee relations investigations, all kinds of things, and very challenging conversations. It's been a muscle I've had to grow because I am naturally a person that wants to run away when there is a conflict or freeze. Now, mind you, I said 99.9% of the time. That other small percentage of the time when I'm at home, especially after a long day where I've given my heart and soul at work, I think us in healthcare can recognize that. You give everything to those you serve. Sometimes there's not a lot left over for those at home. So when it comes down to a disagreement with my husband, it's fight 100% of the time. I will instantly lean right back in and then sometimes go for the jugular. I'm working on this. But there's a combination of not only my energy level at that point in time, but he's the person I trust most in the world. There's a different defense mechanism that pops out. So for you all, what's critical is for in your situation, and in particular, the situation, the conversation that we are going to walk you through today that you're going to prep for so that you can go have after today's session, where are you going to go? What defense mechanisms do you need to manage? And for some of you, it may be only one, and for some of you, it may be multiple. You may go through the entire spectrum of defense mechanisms. What's critical is that you are aware of where you're going to go because it's your responsibility to manage you. So, as we move along, let's talk about transitioning our difficult conversation into an effective one. So, as I mentioned before, I want to redirect your attention back to the Effective Conversations worksheet in the handout section. I want you all today, as we go through these 5 tips, very high level, I'm going to give you an opportunity with all 5 to jot down some notes so that you walk out today thinking through an approach. You have some framework, you have a little bit of work done already on the approach that you're going to take. Now, this is not your script. A script implies that you have it and the other person has it. This is not an exact script of how this conversation is going to go. You're dealing with another human being that doesn't have this script. So it's not about writing out exactly what you're going to say. It's really thinking through, how am I going to bring these tips to life so that I can make this an effective conversation? So in my ideal world, I want you to think about a conversation, in particular a challenging one. So remember the context around difficult. I want you to think of the most challenging, difficult conversation you need to have with somebody, ideally at work. I would love for this to be put into place for a situation you need to address at work. You may say, well, Janelle, I don't have one at work. And I'm like, hey, wonderful. Are you sure? I could probably, for myself, I can think of 3 right off the top of my head. Okay, you don't have one at work. At home then. These tips for conversations, they're fluent to all human beings. So it's for any relationship. So if you don't have one at work, let's think about one at home. And if you're telling me that you don't have to have a challenging conversation coming up at home, I'm like, especially in 2021 or 2020, I'm not sure I believe you. But if that's the case, if there's not one that you can think of right now, I would like you to think about a conversation in the past that did not go well, that you would like to, in hindsight, take a look and you went, hey, this is how I would have shifted my approach. It's crucial for us in this time, especially our small amount of time together as we are doing this learning burst, that you make it real to you. So it's fundamental. Choose a situation that is relevant to you using either work, home, or a past conversation. For the worksheet itself, if you can't download it, if you're not able to type on it, if there's any kind of complications, don't you worry. You can have the questions up. I will show them on the screen as well. You can even have it down to where you jot down on a piece of paper or type off on the other side of your computer, whichever way, absolutely fine. I just want you walking out with some notes for yourself on how you will action each one of these tips. So let's get going. The first tip, begin with the end in mind, is the critical starting point. Begin with the end in mind is the first of multiple reminders in all of this for you to calm your defense mechanisms that kick in. So if I were to take myself, when I am faced with a difficult conversation, especially one that I'm caught off guard by, when my heart starts pounding, I just want to run away. I don't want to have it. I want to figure out a harmonious way out of it. And if I do that, we're not going to address what needs to be addressed. I'm not going to be able to resolve, engage in the conversation that needs to happen if I just run away from it. So when I think about this is literally to lift your head up out of the situation. And I say start with your heart. I almost like saying calming your heart, taking a breath, and then tapping into what you really want for yourself. What do you really want for the other person? What do you really want for the relationship, the team, the family, or the organization? This is about you pulling out of that immediate emotional response. And depending upon the situation, it could be really frustrating, a lot of energy around it, to take a step back, take a breath, look up and say, all right, at the end of the day, what am I really hoping for? When I think about my example with my husband, the hope at the end of the day isn't that we're in a screaming match. We got married. I want to be with him. Made this choice. I'm excited about being with him. So at the end of the day, I'd like us to be on the same page. I'd like us to be a partnership. So let me lift my head up and really think about and vision what I'm hoping for at the end of the day, what I hope for him, what I hope for us. So for you all, I'm going to give you 2 minutes. I'll have my own little timer set up here. You might be able to hear it through my microphone, where you will jot down notes. What do you, in your situation, the conversation you need to have, or the conversation that you have already had and you're working through, what do you really want for yourself? What do you really want for the other person? What do you want for the relationship, the team, the family, the organization, whatever your context is? All right, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to start jotting down some notes. About 10 more seconds to wrap up. Okay. All right, let's go right into tip 2 now. Keep us moving along. So these remaining tips, you're going to bob and weave through them. And when I mean bob and weave, it means you're going to organically go through it as human beings. Tip number 1 is absolutely, I think it kind of makes sense why that's the one you start with, because you really think big picture about what you're hoping for. The especially 2, 3, 4, you're going to weave in and out of them depending upon what the conversation calls for, how it's going. And they're all very important. So as we progress along here, tip number 2 creates safety. Now, safety is it, this one requires a topic and full day seminars even in it of itself. Safety is not only just the physical safety. Hey, are we, if we're in person, are we virtually in a space that won't cave in on us? Uh, we're not having this conversation in the middle of the street, we get hit by a car. So yes, of course, physical safety. This is speaking to the deeper safety of, are we in this space where, number one, I can manage my defense mechanisms and I can show up where my brain is turned on versus just my heart pumping. And how about that for the other person? Is this a space for them too, where we can manage our defense mechanisms as best as possible? So, this is your second reminder to breathe. It's when I think of this, especially my yoga, my meditation fans, there's all this science around the power of even just 3 breaths to manage that emotional defense response that happens immediately, especially if you get triggered. And when I even think triggered, it's like that thing that I call it ping is my language. So we can have that shared language today. Ping is when I feel like I've gotten punched in the gut and I'm just fully activated. That's my ping. And even my language with my team and my friends of like, ooh, you hit something, you hit my defense mechanism, I'm activated right now. So in this just breathe session, part of this, you may even find that, you know what? I can't have this conversation because I can't manage my defense mechanisms right now. And I've had that. I've absolutely had that where I have been pinged in such a way where, in some cases, I'm so angry it's just not going to be as effective, or all I want to do is run away, so I'm not going to say what I need to say. And especially with my folks, where it's like jumping into fight. And as I know at home, when you go for that jugular, there's certain things you can't take back, or it's a lot harder to take it back. So this can be the time and space where you say, you know what? I'm saving this conversation for a time when I can better manage me, when I'm in a better headspace, when we can better manage the defense mechanisms. This leads us right into paying attention. So, not only paying attention to you and your own triggers, where you're at emotionally, but the other person. Now, you may have an entire spectrum here of this conversation. You may know this person really well and when they're activated. So, you'll know, ooh, this is not the right time to have this conversation. I need to hold. Or you may not know this person well and you have to learn, and that's okay. And with a lot of us in these conversations, these aren't one and done. All right, we'll get to that in tip number 5, but sometimes you got to revisit these and you will learn over time, oh, this is the best headspace that this person can be in. Now, again, remember, you can't control them. You can think about what's the space that I'm creating. And this is also the call out. And I know it's particularly challenging in healthcare, depending upon you where you are, if you're on the floor, if you have a private space, if you don't. This is the call out of, is this a conversation that can be more in a private space? Typically with these, this is not the conversation you want to be having in front of multiple people, calling somebody out versus calling them in and having a private conversation to talk through this. I've even seen it on the floor where folks have like a private corner that they can go to just talk through quickly. Hey, here's what's working, here's what's not. All right, this requires a larger conversation. Let's do that. Let's schedule that here. So this is the space in where you're really seeing this are we in this general venue able to manage our defense mechanisms where we're not worried about it, are other people watching? Are we getting called out right now? This is one of the advantages that I do see in the virtual space, where folks in particular, when you are able to use your webcam, getting a bit more privacy, I see a lot of advantages that have come around being able to have these conversations more privately as opposed to before. So these are the general themes to be thinking through here around safety. And the ground in which these stand on, these conversations can even occur, is respect. back to my original example or my earlier one of where, at times that I've been so angry and I knew that I needed to just take a breath. This wasn't the right time. The other element of this is when I have been so frustrated, it it shows in my tone, it shows in my body language, it shows in what I say, and it shows in the way that I can't be respectful at times. If I'm so frustrated and I can't demonstrate respect to somebody else, I think each one of us has likely at some point in our life felt disrespected. And if there's something to tap into your defense mechanisms more, it's right there in the disrespect zone. If you are not able to show up respectfully, demonstrate respect in these conversations, it's already path to an ineffective outcome. So critical here is checking in with yourself. Can you show up in a way that is respectful? Can this space be created to put you both on the best path possible and within your control? So when I think about this, back to your worksheet, the questions that I want you to start, the responses, what I want you to start thinking through and jotting notes down about. What is your emotional state? Now, right now, you're probably calm, right? I hope that you're enjoying this thus far. I hope my voices are right for you all and engaging, but you're not necessarily, you're likely not in a state of heart pounding and tapped by your defense mechanisms. So where are you going to go in this conversation? What are you going to have to manage? What are your defense mechanisms that are going to flare up? Is that the right state of mind to have the conversation? What do you need to shift? Also, what do you want to pay attention to? Not just the content, but other cues that are going to say, hey, safety, our ability to manage our defense mechanisms actually do exist. And how, just start brainstorming, jotting down, how are you going to create safety? So, same concept. Right now, I think we're still on track where I can still give you a couple minutes. So go ahead now, start jotting down some notes, and then we'll move on to the next tip. Okay, about 10 more seconds to wrap up. Okay. All right, let's move into tip 3. And now tip 3 and 4 heavily, you're going to go right back and forth between one another as well. Tip 3 is like the start of the conversation, and tip 4 is staying in the conversation. And oftentimes when I sit with folks, there's a lot of struggle in how do you even start a conversation like this effectively. The start is really such an indicator of how it's going to go. So you want to put your best foot forward. And where you really need to start is to take a step back in your own mind. And I love this little pretty view. It reminds me of a story. And I can just instantly start imagining in my head my own story. Key for us to recognize is that In each of these situations, you really only have your perspective, especially if you haven't already talked to the other person about it. And what's really easy and what our minds are brilliant at is filling in any blanks in the story. So only the perspective that you have, that you've observed, if there's those blanks from the other person, is you fill in those blanks with your story. And you might find that that voice in your head sometimes share with you, has the propensity to share with you that, oh, you're the hero of this, Janelle. This is everything you've done right in here. You're the right person on this. You didn't do anything wrong. Or you're the victim. Hey, why are they teaming up on you? Why did they do this to you? Or in general, and in some of you as you deal with it, and I can do this too, Janelle, you did this all wrong. Like going into huge extremes. At the end of the day, though, when you really stop and pause, you may find that, wow, a lot of what's being said in my head and this story in my head is exactly that. It's a story. I only have so much of the facts here, and I'm filling in the rest. But that story and what you're telling, what your head is saying to you, it's fueling your emotions, it's fueling frustration, and can be leading to a lot more frustration than really what it should be in reality, what the facts actually warrant. So when I think about this, sometimes it's even hard, even for me as I sit back and in particular situations and folks that I get frustrated with, it can be so hard to separate, okay, but really, what did I observe? What was observable about this? And now what's my story? So when I think about that, it's a simple formula to simplify your reality. So down to the basics, there was what you were expecting in this situation. And burp, what you observed. It was different from what you expected. Now, before jumping to the story and bridging with the story, it's time to bridge with the facts. And there's a bunch of different ways to do this. So for today, what I want to provide you an example of is how to identify your impact, to identify the impact of the situation up front versus assigning intent versus telling a story. And I'll use an example. So an executive leader, my leader, we had program A, which was a high potential program for about 10 leaders, one of those ones that you get really great recognition for, lots of kudos, very shiny, very good reputationally. And then we had program B. It's a process improvement approach that ultimately benefit a process for about 100 plus employees and down the road, how we deliver patient care. Program A is much shinier, get much more room to build your reputation. Program B was not one in particular that my leader was going to get a lot of credit for. It was a lot of behind the scenes work, but in my lens, a much greater impact. And with being in a state of so little resources, especially right now, it was my mindset of we should be investing and putting our limited resources to what is going to have a greater impact. So my leader and I did not see eye to eye on this. And what ended up happening is the story in my head grew of, oh, the only reason we're doing program A is just for the recognition, just for the ego boost. There's no other, like, give me a different explanation. How could we be investing in this when we have program B that would benefit so many other people? I could tell I was storytelling already. I absolutely was missing his perspective. So in my conversation with him, I shared, I'd like to chat with you about program A. It's my perception that program A is the nicer, the fancier thing to have. It's really an ego boost, an ego driven. I know that this is a story in my head. Help me understand your perspective. What am I missing? In this conversation, I was able to share the impact of my leader's uh, investment in program A versus program B. So when coming out, I said, hey, it's my perception, blah, blah, blah. And I did use the words ego. Now, I didn't get fired. So we had, when I think about the approaches in all of these things, what's critical is also your relationship with that person. Now, is this a conversation I would have opened up with an executive leader the first day I met them? No, I probably would have shifted my language. But in this particular case, it was very important, and with where we were at in our relationship, to be honest and share my perception is this is shiny and this is what looks good versus having the most impact. I know I'm missing something from your perspective. Help me understand. So the opening of these conversations is to give exactly that. Share with them, hey, here's what I observed. You know, I heard when this occurred, this was the impact of it. What's your perspective? It's to instantly put on the table, hey, here's the impact of what occurred, of the difference between what I expected and what I observed. And instead of me putting my own story to it and going further down the path of, oh, it's just ego driven, you don't want to do anything right for the organization, like I can go down an entire path, pause that story and say, can I understand your perspective? What are your thoughts? What am I missing? When I think about that, eh, this is often too where folks, like I shared before, they stumble in the beginning of how do you even start these. So I wanted to share, not only is there that XYZ approach that I just told you, but there's multiple ways of being able to share with someone, hey, here was the impact. What are your thoughts? I need your help with what just happened. Can I have a minute to understand your perspective? There's been something on my mind that's been bothering me, and I'm wondering if we can explore this together. You know, all the way down to the bottom, I'd like to see if we might reach a better understanding about ABC. I really want to hear your perspective about this and share mine as well so we can align. Would that be all right? Be amazed by even just inviting, is that all right? Is this something we can do together? So, for you all now in your own time, and taking the step back and checking the story in your head about this situation. Really, what is your reality? Your factual reality. And think, what might theirs be? So pop out of the emotions and say, okay, what might be going on? What parts of your reality may be assumptions? And when you think about initiating this, exploring this with the other person, how would you engage them? What are some approaches you would take so that you could share that impact? You can explore their perspective. All right, looking at time here. So I'll give you right here, I'll probably give you about just a minute to start thinking about that. And then we'll go into tip number, the next tip, which will really build on this anyway. So with that, I'm going to let's do a minute, and then I will call you all back. All right, about 10 more seconds. Okay, moving right into tip number 4. Create dialogue through curiosity. So you're in tip 3. You're really checking your reality and you've opened up the conversation. This is now about staying in the conversation by being genuinely curious. This one is one that I continue to explore and really need to revisit because it can be so challenging depending upon the situation, depending upon how you're pinged, the defense mechanisms, say this is now the 15th time you've had to have the conversation with this person, it requires the most strength at times to be genuinely curious in these conversations, depending upon the context. And it is so vitally important. Curiosity, and I'm going to do a little tangent in the healthcare space, and this is heavily covered in Crucial Conversations. Crucial Conversations uses a lot of healthcare examples because of the huge, huge consequences if healthcare professionals are not having effective conversations, are aligning, are on the same page. The pool of shared meaning up here is the call to creating the space where folks can share their diverse perspectives. In healthcare in particular, if we were all to think one way, we would not innovate and save lives. If we were all to think one way, we wouldn't be this far as far as locating a vaccine, creating a vaccine for COVID. We wouldn't be making all of the different astronomical leaps in healthcare to be able to save patients' lives if we all thought the same way. It is vital that when we engage in conversations as a leader in healthcare, as an individual contributor, as a physician, as whoever you are, that you are creating the space where people want to contribute their ideas. You cannot innovate and go different ways if you don't know those ways exist. And if you don't know those ways exist, it's likely because somebody isn't contributing that idea. And if they're not contributing that idea, you might want to check in on the actual environment. Is this a safe space where people feel they can voice their opinions? Can they raise red flags? Can they call out safety issues? Are they able to challenge where they need to so that at the end of the day, we're delivering the best patient care? This is why it's called the pool of shared meaning. It's literally the space in which people can contribute their ideas free flowing without fear of, oh, I'm just going to be shut down. And I think likely each one of us understands what it's like to be shut down, have your idea scoffed at, or questioned in such a way where you're like, well, I'm never going to contribute again. It's probably been something that each one of us has experienced. And it makes you think twice about ever wanting to say your perspective again, which is such a disservice because there is a reason why we're all in the organizations we are. Our diverse lens is vital. It does not mean that that's the path we go. Remember back to the beginning. It's not you get your way, it's the quality of the relationship grows. And for here in particular, it's all perspectives are on the table so that we can choose the best path forward. When I think of that in this conversation and really what staying curious is, it's not just the words you say. So when I think about communication, that is a huge field. Words are only a part of it. Your how, your tone, your body language. I'll give you an example. What happened versus what happened? You can't see me on screen right now, but if you can hear my tone, I said the same thing and it was different. The other piece of this is your body language. The advantage that I really appreciate, especially in spaces in the virtual space where you've got webcams on and in those conversations, is I've actually been able to see my body language. If you've never received feedback about your body language, please do. So whether you're now finally seeing yourself more up on webcams so you can see it face to face what your body is saying, or you have that trusted friend, I'd say two perspectives, that trusted friend and then a person who frustrates you and you respect their opinion, get the feedback from both of them. Especially the person that frustrates you, they likely see your body language in different ways, and especially in more challenging ways and ways you would want to monitor. It is vitally important that you are matching your intent, what you are hoping for, with what your body is saying, what your tone is saying. So that And my apologies, I should have done the little caveat at the upfront, but we're doing so well. That's my dog in the background. So Coda agrees. So in this time, it is vitally important that you are present in these conversations. It's so easy to also get distracted by email, by phone, by texting. This is really the part of the conversation where you are genuinely curious, you are present, your body is saying, I'm here, I want to explore, I want to find the best path. And that's where I want to really call out it is not just the words that you say, it is all of the how, your tone, your body language. So, with that, how do you stay in dialogue? Some key ones that I really appreciate: what happened? Tell me more. I want to ensure I'm hearing you. Let me check in at this point. How does what I'm saying impact you? This is really to stay in there and to dive deeper. And in the example that I shared with you about my leader, when we ultimately explored, I realized he didn't have my perspective about Program B at all. I really thought he had a lot more context than he did about Program B, its impact. And I was missing key context about Program A. I really was. In that, when we explained, hey, tell me more. What does that mean? Hey, leader, this is what I'm hearing from you. What are you hearing from me? We were able to dive in deeper and really understand each other and understand more details and our perspectives more mutually to where we both learned. And at the end of the day, we came out of that conversation with an approach to be able to resource both. We were able to shift around timelines, shift into some different resources, tap into resources that I wasn't even aware of, so that at the end of the day, we knew both were a priority. It was just how to bring them to life. So when I think about that, let's give you all um, about a minute, running just a little bit behind on this one. So I'm going to give you a minute to think about what specific questions would you open up a genuine dialogue in this situation so that you can learn about their perspective. So jumping from the last tip, expand more on that of how you would open, and then what are you going to be curious about? How would you pose your curiosity positively? What words or phrases will you use? All right, so I'll give you just about a minute here. Okay, about 10 more seconds. Okay. So to close us out here, tip number 5, take action and honor the relationship. Oftentimes this one is skipped. You do all this hard work of exploring, being curious, and then when it comes time to say, okay, what have we decided? We can skip it. So what's key here, and what I want to come back to, is something that I had said before, and that's intent versus impact. So this is the key space for you to identify, for you both to come together and really be clear about, has what you both intended really come across? So in this conversation, what you were really hoping for, is your intent, what you're really aiming for coming across? Is that what the person is walking away with? People do not walk away with your intentions. That's why they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. They walk away with how you impact them. And what you've said is not necessarily what they heard. So this is the time to ensure that you and the other person have the space of, truly, is what you're intending what I am walking away with, and vice versa. So this is the space to get really clear. What will change? What's going to stay the same? Who's going to do what differently by when? Confirm those agreements. Really ensure that you're on the same page. This is also where you may find that, hey, you have these agreements and then tomorrow, maybe the same behavior happens. Like I said before, sometimes these conversations need to happen multiple times. We've all been on this earth X amount of years. That's a lot of behavior to unwind and to change. Behavior change is hard. You both may have agreed to something that's not feasible. Also, and especially in the year of 2020, I've had it in conversations at my organization where we've aligned on something on Monday, and by Wednesday, that's no longer relevant. So, context. So, the key here is not, oh, let me just abandon all of these tips. Let's abandon this because this person didn't say they didn't do what they said they were going to do. It's no, let me get back into this approach and let me be curious about the context. Why is this not feasible? What's going on? Okay. So ensuring that you get those agreements and then revisit them when you need to. This is a journey, it's not a one and done. And with honor, this is about saying thank you. Thank you for being on this journey with me. I'll tell you, I had a conversation last week where we still are not in full agreement. We still need to work through together. But closing out the conversation, I said, thank you for doing this with me. I know that this is challenging. Oftentimes we have very different perspectives where we're not necessarily seeing eye to eye. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate that we can come together and have these challenging conversations in a respectful way. I really appreciate your partnership. Don't undercut how much it means to engage in that respectful approach, regardless of the outcome. So with that, what I will ask you to do, so you guys, for the last step, I'll leave you with that thought. And when we're done with the session today, you can be filling in your notes of what different actions you see as ideal next steps and how you would honor the relationship. That can be your additional homework after this, plus filling in any other notes that you already started on. And my call to action to all of you, so as you think about beginning with the end in mind, creating safety, state your reality, creating dialogue through curiosity, and taking action and honoring the relationship, would be to go out and have this conversation for real now. And I call out to you the importance of accountability partner. So whether it's someone at work, someone at home, somebody that can be along this journey with you, you can share this approach with them. Hey, this is what I'm thinking. And then once you go and have the conversation, you can come back to and say, hey, here's how it went. Here are my glows. Here's what I did really well. Here are my grows. Oof, I want to do better next time. But to have that person along the journey with you. And right there, my apologies, just a few minutes behind on the question space, but have landed at the questions plus have my contact information up there for you all as well.
Janelle, thank you so much for a very timely topic. I'm certain that everyone can take something away from your discussion today. I know that I certainly will be taking plenty away. I would like to offer a few questions that have come in, and we'll make this brief because we do need to wrap up. But our first question is, what happens if at the end of the day, the other person refuses to change? How can you have an effective conversation with them?
Yeah, and it's a tough one, and it goes back to the beginning of the reminder that you only have control over yourself. So when I think about that, it's already in your mindset of just like, oh, this won't be successful unless this other person changes. It's, no, here's what's within my control. So my call is this shift in your own brain to say, all right, what's within my control? Within my control is how I show up, how I manage myself, the space I create, the respect I show, and how I share my perspective. And depending upon the situation, down the road, what it ultimately can call for is your own boundaries with that person. Okay, if this is ultimately going to be how you behave, here's some key boundaries that I need to put in place. That's for the well-being of myself, the situation. It's a great reminder, though, of really pulling yourself back up and saying, all right, what control do I have over myself, knowing that I don't have control over anyone else?
Thank you. And our next question is, what if the other person is lying and you know it?
Yeah, it's a tough, right? It goes back into the what can I control this other person? Yeah, in this space, like a couple quick tips and things that I've also learned in just some of the languaging that I've used in particular situations. I've had it with a colleague who one day would tell me A, the next day would tell me B about the same situation. And in that particular situation, I was like, okay, here's what I'm hearing from you. I heard A, I heard B. When I put these things together, both are not true at the same time. Help me understand what I'm missing. So they're even with the suspicions of this person's not being honest either which way. I shifted that particular situation to say, all right, let me reflect back what I'm hearing so that we can have a conversation about truly what's the path to go. And I'll say, actually, in that situation, this person didn't even realize that they gave me two pieces of conflicting information. And we did get down to the bottom of it. So still, again, I think it's there's still the call to being curious on this, and then just really thinking through, all right, how do I share this? How do I call out this observation in a way where I can still invite a conversation and also potentially call out something this person wasn't even aware of?
Great. Thank you so much, Janelle, for a fantastic presentation. As I said, I think all of us can take plenty away from this. So thank you again. A quick reminder to our audience that you can obtain your CE certificate by completing the post-webinar survey. The survey will be emailed 1 hour after the completion of today's webinar. You must complete the survey to receive your 1 CE credit, and you will be able to download the certificate directly from your computer once the survey is submitted. If you have any questions, please reach out to me at webinar@mdpublishing.com. ICE Magazine is proud to bring our new monthly webinar series to the imaging industry. Our first webinar of 2021 will feature Kenneth Fazzino. For more information, please visit theicecommunity.com/webinars. Thank you all and have a great day.